How's everybody doing? Khaled Iwamura here from insaga.com, and I have the leader of the Ontario NDP and the official opposition, Andrea Horwath, with me for, I guess we do this kind of like every month, eh?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. So let's start with, very, very sad news. With, that terrorist murder destroying 3 generations of one family and a 9-year-old in a hospital. What needs to be done immediately by the government, to combat hate, racism, white supremacy, and like Islamophobia? What needs to be done now?
Well, it'd be first and foremost, I think it's important to acknowledge just the pain, the anguish, the hurt that is happening within the Muslim community in London, as well as with the family, obviously the Exel family, and the necessity to not allow these kinds of things to continue to happen. Certainly what was being called for when I was in London at the vigil was action. Enough words. I mean, I said that in my own speech. We politicians, we talk, but we need to have some action, and it's long past due. We had the gentleman in I think it was Etobicoke who lost his life, or who was killed in an act of hate. Let's say it as it is, at a masjid, a mosque here in the GTA. We saw what happened in Quebec, but each and every day, Muslims are facing hatred and facing harassment, racist attacks, and it's everyone. It's little kids at school, parents worrying how their kids are going to be able to manage, at a school if they are going to be subject to harassment, to women having their hijabs torn off, to people literally being mowed down by a white supremacist terrorist and Islamophobic terrorist. And so what the NCCM, the National Council of Canadian Muslims, is calling for is a federal summit to be established immediately to start to address the growing tide of Islamophobia in our country. And yesterday I committed to support that. I didn't see a commitment necessarily from anybody else, but certainly this needs to be led by the Muslim community, and they need to be respected in terms of what their demands are. Because, Khaled, this, we've been having the same conversations for decades, but things have become much worse in the last number of years. And what we do need is we need a plan, and that plan has to be informed by community voices, and it needs to be backed up with commitments. It can't just be a summit that then that's the answer. I don't think that's what the NCCM is asking for. I think they're asking for a summit that generates solutions, and then the governments make commitments to those solutions. What we don't want is to go backwards. What we don't want is what's happening, frankly, in our province, where the anti-racism directorate has been cut off at the knees, where the government's withdrawn funding from that organization that was supposed to be working on exactly these issues: the rise of hate, the rise of racism, the rise of discrimination, and the systemic discrimination that we still see in so many of our institutions and organizations here in Ontario. So there's a lot of work to be done. The last thing we need to do is start walking away from that work, which is unfortunately what's happening in our province.
Do you think schools should reopen for in-class learning now?
I was pretty disappointed when the government decided not to prioritize our kids, but that's what Doug Ford has been doing all along. I mean, even back last September, he wasn't investing in the kind of ventilation and air cleaning, renovations that needed to be done. The backlog in terms of school repairs is enormous and increasing under the Ford government. So after 15 years, we had about $14.9 billion of backlog school repairs. Now it's increased by another $1 billion with this government, but they could have been increasing the ventilation and air filtering systems in schools. They could have reduced class sizes to 15 or fewer to provide for the distancing. They could have been doing that massive testing that they said they were going to do, and they didn't ever do it. I think they promised like 50,000 tests a week, and the highest they ever got to was just over 8,000. There was a lot of things the government could have done to prioritize our kids, and instead they didn't. And so that put families into chaos for so many months, and it really negatively has impacted our children, not only their learning, but their social development, their mental health, their ability to socialize and to get those social cues, under their belts in terms of their own development. I mean, so I'm disappointed. It could have been different, but what we've always said is we wanted the schools to open safely. So opening the schools without putting these measures in place wouldn't have been good enough.
You're talking about opening schools safely. What has to happen in September for that to happen?
Well, Khaled, I think all of the things I just talked about also need to happen for September. But we have to acknowledge that there's a lot of kind of work to be done to get kids back on their feet and to get them where they need to be to succeed. They've lost a lot. There has been learning loss, not by anybody's fault, but there's been learning loss. We know that there are mental health concerns. We know that kids have been isolated and alone for far too long, unable to socialize. So we need to put a plan in place, not just pretend that we just go back to school in September and it's normal again. It's not normal. The schools need work. Obviously, the investment needs to be made. And what we're seeing is the government going again in the opposite direction. $800 million out of education this year in the 2021 budget. But the Financial Accountability Officer has shown that this government's plan going forward is to continue to cut education. We need to put a plan together to support our kids, to get them back to where they need to be, and that's got to be a priority. I don't see any planning happening right now in that regard.
My kid is turning 16 this week, and him and his friends want to go back to school like right now. He's like, give me a day and I'll go back. Right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So what would you say the province's reopening plan, is it too cautious, or do you think it's kind of a mistake to say, hey, let's open up this Friday?
We've always recommended that the government listen to the advice of the science table, of the public health experts. And I know in Peel Region, you've got a really excellent public health lead in Dr. Lowe. And what we need is for the government to always listen to their advice. So I have not seen advice from specifically from those folks, but the government's relying on, I guess, numbers of cases that are down, as well as ICUs that are down, ICU usage that's down. Although there's some worry from some experts that the ICU usage is not down far enough. And I think the big issue that we now have is the Delta variant. And I was in London, so I apologize if I'm off of the news cycle a tiny bit, but I haven't heard a commitment from the government to prioritize hotspots for second doses, so that places like Peel and Scarborough are able to get the second doses necessary to prevent that Delta variant, because the last thing anybody wants or needs is a fourth wave.
Yeah, and yeah, it's a good segue into my next question. Was I have Mayor Crombie and Mayor Brown on every week, and they've been, waving the flag, saying, "Hey guys, there's still a fire here. We're still a hotspot. And the reallocation of more vaccines here stopped about, I guess, a couple of weeks ago. Why isn't the province listening to this? I mean, I think it's one of those things that, yeah, it's like you go to the house where there's a fire. That's what Patrick Brown always says. So why isn't the province listening?
Yeah, this is something that is a complete failure of Doug Ford's government to not focus on where the flames are the highest. I mean, that's what we were saying as well. You point the fire hose at the highest flames. That's what needs to happen. And so, we know that there are people in Peel Region that haven't had their first dose, but we also know that they have to have their second dose as well. And I support Mayor Brown and Mayor Crombie in their effort to do so. I called for that last Thursday, the last day of the session, and it was, and I'm still calling for it. I mean, I'm still trying to put the pressure on the government to do the right thing here, to get Doug Ford to do the right thing. But remember, they did temporarily put some extra vaccines into the hotspots. They were supposed to be a 4-week stint. It was supposed to be a 4-week effort, is what the experts told Doug Ford. For 4 weeks, you've got to bump up the vaccines in the Peel region. They didn't. They did 2 weeks. So they took a half step. They did a half measure. Well, the people of Peel aren't half measures. The people of Peel, unfortunately, have been treated like a half measure by governments for a long time. That's why the hospital system, particularly in Brampton, is so lacking. But really, listen to the experts and go the distance for the people who need it the most. Whether it's vaccines, whether it's paid sick days, this government has really not done proper by the people of the Peel region, and what happens is the disease spreads, right? And people lose their lives. Entire families end up in ICUs or in hospitals. Children lose their life. I mean, it's just, it doesn't have to be that way. And I don't know why the Ford government's making the decisions they are. I guess another government is going to take the people of Peel region for granted, and that's not good.
The election, the provincial election, is less than a year away. I guess, yeah, 357 days. I don't know. Anyways, I think it's 1 year, June 2nd. What do you need to do to become Premier of Ontario? What do you need to do?
We're already doing it, Khaled. We're nominating fantastic candidates. We're getting our team is up and running. We've got thousands upon thousands of trained volunteers and more volunteers being trained. And we also have a message of hope that we can actually elect a government in Ontario that puts the needs of everyday families front and center. A government that's prepared to make the tough decisions around long-term care, and they're not tough. They're easy decisions. Neither the Liberals or the Conservatives were interested in doing any of these things, but we are. Get the profits out of long-term care, respect the PSWs and other workers in that sector, long-term care and home care, frankly, and make sure that our seniors and the most vulnerable folks that need the supports can live with dignity, and that their family members can live, with a sense of relief that in fact they're being taken care of. We have an excellent platform that speaks to platform plank that speaks to the housing crisis, both the affordable housing crisis, which New Democrats often talk about, but also the entire spectrum, supportive housing for folks to keep them housed, making sure young people can have a sense of hope around being able to buy a house, and that we deal with the out of control rental and housing market crisis that we're in. I mean, it's just, people are telling me now, young people particularly, that they're postponing growing their families. In some cases, postponing having their first child. In other cases, abandoning the thought of having a second or third child because literally they can't afford, the space, the housing to be able to grow their families. I mean, it shouldn't be that way in our province. So, and then we have the Green New Democratic deal, which is actually our kind of our look towards what the next crisis is, the crisis that actually never went away once COVID hit, and that's the greenhouse gas emissions, our carbon footprint, and what it's doing to our climate. And so it's a plan that is really, it meets all of the targets, it exceeds some of the targets, and it's also focused on justice in terms of creating opportunity for everyone in this province, as well as jobs. So it's a plan for climate justice and jobs, and it's really great. So we have some of our platform done. So candidates, fundraising. We got rid of our debt a long time ago. We've been fundraising significantly. We have a good, solid, kitty, if you want to call it that. When you're playing cards, you got the kitty. We've got a pretty good, solid fundraising situation happening. you know, I think people are still, really concerned about the pandemic, folks. It's not over yet, right? And we still have so much to do to get through these next couple of months. But folks need to have hope that there can be change. There can be a government that actually changes the path in Ontario, and creates a more, a more just, a more equitable, and a more, positive future for the province, not just for developers and not just for big box CEOs and not just for political insiders, but for Ontarians, for the people of the province.
Nice. My next question was going to be, what's the first thing you would do? But you gave me 10 answers there, so I won't ask that question. So perfect. It was just a perfect segue. So last question. What's the first patio you're going to hit on Friday?
Well, that's really funny. We have a big council meeting, which is our parties. Our party has 3 big meetings a year where delegates come. We do it virtually. So I am actually going to be in Hamilton on Friday. And we were just talking in the planning about that exact question. What is going to be my first patio? There's a number of great patios in Hamilton. In my riding, there are a number of great patios, but in all of the ridings in Hamilton, there are a number of them. So I don't know yet, because we have to be making some calls around making sure we can get a table, because the demand is going to be high, I'm sure. And I'm happy that Ontarians are able to start to feel, like things are heading in the right direction, and that, there's the light at the end of the tunnel is getting closer. It's not as distant as it was, but we still have to be careful, right? And I think people need to remember that. And I think that they will. They've worked really hard. They've done everything that was asked of them. And let's just hold on and make sure we're following all the rules so that we don't end up in a 4th wave, and we can put this pandemic behind us once and for all.
So you heard it here first. You're going patio hopping this Friday.
Well, yes, maybe. How about you? Are you going to do that too?
No, I probably not. I live a boring life. I just interview people at home.
Yeah.
I'll let you know next interview. So Andrea Horwath, leader of the Ontario NDP, thank you so much. I'll catch you maybe next month.
I would certainly hope so, Khaled. Certainly hope so. Take care.